You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. Sleep remains a luxury I can no longer afford. Therapy labels it trauma's echo, this persistent wakefulness. Perhaps. But what transpired that night beneath the canopy of Blackwood Ridge fractured my world, peeling back the veneer of the mundane to reveal something else. I need to cast these words onto the page to drain this poison from my thoughts. Maybe then, quiet will return. It began, as such things often do, with foolishness fueled by cheap beer. 5 souls adrift on a current of celebration. Myself, Leo, Chloe, Reese, and Maya. Leo had snagged a promotion, reason enough for us to drown ourselves at the Rusty Mug. Amidst the boozy haze, someone slurred a challenge. A nocturnal trek through Blackwood Ridge. Barely a mile distant, the woods beckoned, and our intoxication painted recklessness as adventure. A chill had coiled around the night, the air hovering near 45 degrees when we finally stumbled towards the tree line. My phone glowed 11:47 p.m. Above, a full moon presided, yet its light was largely devoured by the dense foliage, leaving us reliant on the weak beams of our phones. We navigated the path, a tangle of laughter and clumsy shoves, echoes bouncing strangely off the bark. "Careful!" Chloe shrieked as Leo feigned pushing her into the undergrowth. Their laughter chased itself through the timber. I trailed behind with Maya and Reese, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot the only steady rhythm. Then, the silence descended, not gradually, but like a switch thrown, plunging the woods into an unnervating void. The insect thrum ceased, the breeze died utterly. Even our own footfalls seemed swallowed by the sudden hush. "Wait," Maya halted, her voice thin. "Do you hear anything?" We froze. Nothing reached my ears initially. Then, subtle but distinct, a dry, scraping cadence, like desiccated claws testing the texture of bark. It emanated from the impenetrable blackness flanking the trail. "Just a possum, maybe," Reese offered, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. We pressed onward, huddled closer now, the previous levity extinguished. The scraping sound shadowed us, a phantom presence shifting from left to right, sometimes seeming to breathe down our very necks. Yet each time we spun around, lights stabbing into the gloom, there was only emptiness. That's when the cabin materialized. It loomed around a bend, a solid black geometry against the deeper shadows of the trees. Perhaps 20 feet square, its log walls were ancient, the roofline sagging precariously. No windows pierced its facade, only a single door hanging askew on corroded hinges. "This is wrong," Leo breathed, his voice tight. He'd grown up near these woods, hiked them countless times. "It was never here," Chloe murmured. "Maybe we wandered off the path?" I fumbled for my phone, seeking the reassurance of a map, but found only no service. A ripple of unease went through us as the others checked theirs, all inert, batteries inexplicably drained, despite being full when we left the bar. The scraping intensified, closer now. A flicker of movement, a distortion in the shadows between trees, registered in our peripheral vision. Without a word exchanged, instinct took over. We bolted towards the cabin. Leo reached the warped door first, wrenching it open with a tortured screech of metal. We spilled inside, Reese slamming it shut behind us, the sound echoing unnaturally in the confined space. Our phone beam sliced through the darkness, revealing a single, dirt-floored room. Barren, save for a decrepit wooden chair slumped in one corner, and set into the earth, what looked chillingly like a trapdoor. The air was thick, cloying with the scent of damp soil, and something else, something rank and unfamiliar. "What in God's name is this place?" Maya whispered, the words barely audible. Before an answer could form, footsteps began outside, slow, measured, circling the structure. The log walls groaned softly, as if under immense pressure. Then came the whispering. Not human speech, not any tongue I recognized. The phonetics were wrong, jagged with consonants, words that seemed to fold and writhe. A multitude of voices, drawing nearer, accelerating into a sibilant chorus. Chloe's fingers dug into my arm like talons. "You hear that, right? Tell me you hear it." "We have to leave," Reese stammered, taking a hesitant step towards the door. Instantly, the whispering ceased. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, for perhaps 5 heartbeats. Then, something slammed against the door with enough force to make the entire cabin shudder. Reese recoiled. Chloe screamed, a raw, tearing sound. More impacts followed, raining down on the walls, the sagging roof. The ancient logs groaned in protest. Dust and grit sifted down from the ceiling beams. "The trapdoor!" Leo yelled suddenly, already fumbling with the iron ring embedded in the wooden panel. "Help me!" Reese and I lunged, adding our weight. The hatch resisted, then lifted with a grating groan, revealing a square aperture 3 feet across, descending into blackness via crude wooden steps. The assault on the cabin escalated violently. Wood splintered above. Something was tearing at the roof. "Go!" I shouted, shoving them towards the opening. "Now!" Chloe scrambled down first, then Maya. Reese hesitated only a second before following. Leo paused at the lip. "What about you?" "Right behind you! Go!" He vanished into the dark. I turned to follow, but a sharp cracking sound from the main door froze me. I swung my light towards it. Through widening fissures in the splintering wood, I saw impressions, shapes that defied geometry, elongated limbs, too many joints, and eyes, dozens of them, gleaming with cold, internal light. I practically fell down the steps, yanking the heavy trapdoor shut above me, just as the cabin door imploded inwards with a deafening crash. The steps descended maybe 15 feet into a narrow, earthen tunnel. Ahead, the bobbing lights of the others were already receding. I scrambled after them, forcing myself not to dwell on the cacophony from above. The scraping, the chittering clicks, the impossible weight of footfalls on the cabin floor. The tunnel twisted, branched. We plunged blindly down random passages, propelled by sheer terror. The air grew colder, the walls transitioning from packed earth to rough-hewn stone. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere in the darkness ahead. After an eternity compressed into minutes, we slammed into a dead end. Solid rock. No escape. No, this can't be. Chloe sobbed, her body trembling. We spun around, but the sounds were closer now, echoing hideously off the stone confines. The whispers pursued us, faster, frantic, almost gleeful. "Lights out," Leo hissed, his voice barely a whisper itself. "What? Are you insane?" Maya shot back, her voice tight with panic. "Trust me. Kill them." One by one, our weak beams winked out, plunging us into a darkness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. I pressed my back against the frigid stone, fighting to control the ragged rhythm of my breath. The whispers surged closer. I could smell it now. A miasma of damp earth, decay, and something metallic, like ozone before a storm. A scraping sound echoed just around the invisible bend. I squeezed my eyes shut, a useless gesture in the Stygian black. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was certain they could hear. The scraping stopped, seemingly right before us. I felt a feather-light brush against my cheek. Something cold, textured like rough bark. I bit down hard on my lip, stifling a scream. The whispering was intimate now, directly in my ear. I felt breath on my skin, but it carried no warmth. It was chill, like air from a subterranean fissure. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ceased. We remained frozen in that suffocating darkness for what felt like lifetimes. No one dared breathe, let alone speak. Eventually, Reese whispered, his voice cracking, "Are they gone?" The silence stretched, thick and expectant. Finally, Leo risked it, clicking his light back on. The tunnel was empty. We waited another 10 minutes, hearts pounding, before inching our way back through the labyrinthine passages. Disoriented by panic, it took agonizingly long to retrace our steps, but eventually, we found the crude wooden stairs leading upward. Leo ascended first, easing the trapdoor open with infinite caution. The cabin stood vacant. The main door was a ruin of splinters. Deep gouges scarred the log walls, but whatever had inflicted the damage had vanished. We didn't hesitate. We burst out into the night and ran, fleeing back towards the trail, towards sanity. No one spoke. We didn't stop until the artificial glow of streetlights haloed the edge of the woods. The police listened with patient disbelief, of course. A daylight search the following day yielded nothing. No cabin, no disturbed earth where a tunnel might have been, not even rotting timbers or rusty hinges. It was as if Blackwood Ridge had swallowed the entire episode whole. We rarely speak of it now. Reese moved across the country. Chloe and Maya ceased answering my calls, retreating into a shared silence I couldn't penetrate. Leo remains in town, but the jovial man who celebrated his promotion is gone, replaced by someone who seeks solace solely at the bottom of a bottle. I ventured back once, bathed in the deceptive safety of daylight, compelled to find the place, to impose logic on the illogical. Perhaps seeing it again, understanding its non-existence, would silence the nightmares. I found nothing. No misplaced cabin, no hidden trail. But as I turned to leave the oppressive quiet of the woods, I heard it, fleetingly, that dry, chitinous scratching. And beneath it, almost subliminal, the sibilant murmur of whispers. I ran. I haven't set foot in Blackwood Ridge since. Yet sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I awaken to the sound of scratching, faint but undeniable, seeming to come from within my own bedroom walls. And if I press my ear close, straining against the plaster, I can almost discern patterns in that impossible, inhuman language. The doctors call it PTSD, prescribe pills to quiet the echoes. But they weren't there. They didn't hear the whispers twist the air. They didn't see what slithered and watched through a splintering door. I commit this account to paper not expecting belief, but as a testament, a warning. Should you ever find yourself walking shadowed paths at night and stumble upon a structure alien to the landscape, resist the urge to seek shelter within, regardless of what terrors you perceive lurking in the darkness at your back. Do not breach that threshold, because sometimes the entities dwelling in the cracks of our reality grow curious about us, and their curiosity is a consuming, dangerous thing. Last night, the scratching returned, but this time felt different. This time, amidst the guttural chorus, I understood a single, chilling word. They were whispering my name. Let me tell you what overtook me just last month, out at the Meridian Motor Inn. 20 years I've wrestled 18-wheelers down asphalt rivers, bunked down in 1,000 roadside boxes, but never have I crossed paths with anything like this. I have to cage it in words now, you understand, because every time my eyelids shut or closed, that goddamn chair materializes in the darkness. It unspooled itself around 11 on a Tuesday night. I was piloting a load of furniture, Chicago bound for Kansas City, and my vision was blurring at the edges, the highway hypnosis taking hold. Interstate 70 out there in Missouri is a long ribbon thrown across emptiness, and the Sandman was wrestling me for the wheel. That's when I saw it. The Meridian's neon vacancy sign bleeding pink through an insistent mist. Below it, block letters promised shelter for $29 a night. Seemed fair enough for oblivion. The lot breathed vacancy. Just my rig, a pickup bleeding rust onto the cracked blacktop, and maybe 2 spectral sedans huddled against the gloom. The office air hung thick with stale cigarettes, trying and failing to surrender to pine disinfectant. The Nightman, a skeletal youth barely scraping 20, all sharp angles, bad skin, and lank hair, offered only the briefest flicker of acknowledgement from his phone's blue glow. One room, I managed, fishing for my wallet. He slid a registration card across the scarred formica. Cash or plastic? Plastic. I scrawled my details while he processed the visa, the pen tethered to the counter by a length of defiant fishing line. Room 207, he droned, slapping down a key attached to a plastic fob the size of a tarot card. Far end, right side. Checkout's 11. Rain slicked the pavement as I trudged back to the Kenworth. I snagged my overnight duffel and the smaller grip holding the essentials. Wallet, laptop, logbook. Wouldn't leave those vulnerable, not even in this forgotten fold of the map. Room 207 exhaled the scent of damp earth and forgotten things. The carpet, a faded memory of beige, clung grimly to the floor. Wallpaper curled away from the seams like dry lips. A queen bed slumped beneath a thin, brown coverlet. And there, a sentinel of worn wood, stood the chair, angled by the window beside a small table, hoisting a lamp with a drunkenly tilted shade. I dumped my bags onto the chair, a reflex, and commenced the ritual. Tested the locks, gave the bathroom a cursory inspection for overt biohazards, scanned the mattress edges. Satisfied, or perhaps just resigned, I cranked the heater. It shuddered awake, sighing warm, dust-laden breath into the room. The bed springs groaned a protest as I sat to wrestle off my boots. my spine singing with the ache of 10 hours clenched over the wheel. Muffled sitcom laughter seeped through the wall from the adjacent room. Rain tapped a hesitant rhythm against the window pane. A quick shower, sweats, and a tea. Alarm punched for 6 a.m. The pillow yielded like a sigh beneath my head, but exhaustion was a lead blanket. I remember my gaze snagging on the chair one last time before I killed the lamp. My bags formed a slumped silhouette of nylon and canvas upon its seat. 3:17 a.m. My eyes flew open, the clock radio's crimson digits burning onto my retinas. Something had fractured the sleep, but what? The neighbor's television was mute. The rain had ceased. Only the low thrum of the heater disturbed the profound quiet. Then, my focus locked onto the chair. My luggage wasn't on it anymore. It rested on the floor, placed with an unnerving neatness, side by side against the chair's legs. That wasn't the detail that sent ice tracing its way up my spine. The chair itself looked occupied. The flat wooden seat bore a distinct depression, shallow but undeniable, as if molded by unseen weight. The arms showed faint indentations where hands might grip. Yet, nothing. Only vacancy shaped by pressure. I lay utterly frozen, my breath caught tight in my chest. The impressions were significant. Whatever held court in that chair possessed adult mass, substance. And the air in the room had plummeted, easily 10 degrees colder than when I'd succumbed to sleep. My mind scrabbled for reason. Just dreaming. But the clock's numbers were too sharp, the heater's hum too persistent. The chair's wood is warped? No, it had looked solid. I moved the bag sleepwalking. Hadn't done that since I was 8. Besides, the cold was real, a palpable thing. And deeper than the cold, the undeniable presence of another consciousness sharing the space. Headlights from a passing car swept the far wall, a brief, cinematic illumination. In that fleeting wash of light, I swear I saw the chair subtly adjust, a minute shift, as if its unseen occupant resettled. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Sweat bloomed on my brow despite the chill. Flight screamed through my nerves, but escape meant traversing the space near the chair. A scream lodged itself, a solid knot in my throat. Time stretched, became elastic. I remained rigid beneath the thin covers, eyes welded to the corner. Was there movement? A flicker in the depth of the seat's depression. A flex in the wooden arms under invisible strain. The dimness filtered through the cheap curtains, played tricks perhaps, or perhaps not. At 3:42 a.m., a sound scraped through the silence, freezing the marrow in my bones. Shoe leather whispering against carpet pile. It originated from the chair's vicinity. Paralyzed by terror, I watched as indentations materialized in the threadbare carpet. Phantom footprints, pressing down, moving away from the chair, advancing toward the bed. Slow, measured, deliberate. The temperature plunged further, stealing breath. Adrenaline finally shattered the paralysis. I erupted from the bed, scrambling backward, colliding with the flimsy bathroom door. My fumbling hand found the light switch, slapped it upward. Harsh, fluorescent glare bleached the room. The footprints halted, perhaps 3 feet from where my head had lain moments before. The chair sat vacant, yet the concave shape in the wood remained. Even as I stared, the depression began to shallow, slowly, infinitesimally rising, as if releasing its burden. Simultaneously, new footprints bloomed in the carpet, charting a course toward the room's main door. They stopped. The brass knob turned with a soft click. The door swung inward 6 inches, hung there for a heartbeat, then smoothly closed. The knob rotated back. I stood trembling like a tuning fork for what felt like an eternity. The clock insisted only 10 minutes had crawled by. Finally, automaton-like, I moved, snatched my bags from the floor, didn't bother changing, jammed my feet into unlaced boots. The night clerk glanced up, his face impassive in the phone's glow, as I slammed the key fob onto the counter. Leaving already? Yeah, I croaked, the word ragged. He offered a negligent shrug. No refunds past midnight. Doesn't matter. I shouldered through the glass door into the pre-dawn damp, practically sprinting to the sanctuary of my cab. Sunrise was painting the horizon bruised colors by the time I found refuge in a truck stop 50 miles down I-70. I nursed coffee in the bland cafe until the tremors subsided enough for the cup to remain steady in my grasp. I've spent hours since constructing logical scaffolding. Old wood holds strange shapes. Buildings groan. Exhaustion breeds hallucination. Hollow arguments. I know the chill I felt, the pressure I saw, the sound I heard. Something resided in that chair. That particular stretch of highway remains on my roots. I barrel past the Meridian Motor Inn now, eyes straight ahead. Usually, its windows are dark eyes staring into the night. But once, only once, passing late, I saw a faint light illuminating room 207. Through the gauzy curtains, stark against the glow, stood the silhouette of that wooden chair. And it was not empty. The days following that night were punctuated by unsettling echoes. Inexplicable cold spots migrating through my truck's cab for 100 miles. Strange depressions appearing momentarily on the passenger seat when I glanced over. Phantom footsteps shuffling in the empty trailer during mandatory rest breaks. Different specters, perhaps, for another telling. Right now, the chair demands its due. The telling of what transpired in room 207 at the Meridian Motor Inn, lost in a rainy Missouri nowhere. Because I have a manifest for tomorrow, the destination necessitates traversing that same highway. And as I reviewed the paperwork earlier, a detail leaped out, clamping a cold fist around my gut. The delivery address is on the service road paralleling the Meridian, barely 2 miles beyond it. A furniture wholesaler. They're expecting a consignment of wooden chairs. Hours bled into the asphalt ribbon unfurling before me, a relentless push through the dark. No map guided my flight, no destination beckoned. Only a profound weariness, a bone-deep exhaustion with the familiar contours of my own life propelled the car forward. It was a desperate need for elsewhere. Anywhere but the suffocating stillness I'd left behind. Just the machine's low thrum, the hypnotic sweep of headlights, and a highway whispering promises of oblivion. Then, near the witching hour, a bloom of artificial light against the oppressive velvet black. A solitary diner, clinging to the roadside like a stubborn barnacle. Its neon sign, a fractured pulse of pink, announced its presence across the void. For miles, nothingness had reigned supreme, Now, this unexpected outpost materialized, and hunger gnawed with sudden insistence. I swung the car onto the cracked tarmac, a lonely vessel joining only a single, rust-pocked pickup truck that seemed welded to the shadows. The entire structure exhaled an air of neglect, a relic adrift from time. Yet, sustenance and a moment's respite were all I craved. A fragile chime announced my entry as the door sighed shut behind me. The interior was stark, vacant, yet meticulously clean, echoing with a profound silence. Behind the long Formica counter stood a woman, perhaps midway through her 5th decade, her silver hair secured in a severe knot, her face a study in impassivity. Her gaze flickered over me, registering my presence with minimal interest, before returning to some unseen focal point. What'll it be? The question emerged flat, devoid of inflection, almost mechanical. Coffee, I managed, voice raspy from disuse. And anything solid you have. A curt nod was her sole reply before she pivoted, movements economical, to draw a mug of coffee from a gleaming urn. I let my eyes drift, absorbing the details. The worn vinyl stools, the faint scent of bleach and old grease, the unsettling tidiness of a place marooned in the immense nowhere. She returned, placing a steaming mug and a plate bearing a simple sandwich before me. Sustenance, however plain. I lifted the mug, the coffee scalded, its bitterness a jolt to the system, yet necessary. As I ate, a prickling awareness crawled up my spine. Her attention, though indirect, felt constant. Each time my gaze lifted towards her, her eyes would dart away, her hands busying themselves polishing an already spotless surface or adjusting napkin dispensers that required no adjustment. It was a subtle, unnerving choreography. Traveling late, she observed finally, her voice still level, her focus apparently fixed on the percolator's rhythmic sigh. Yes, I clipped, hoping brevity would suffice. Conversation felt like a treacherous path I had no desire to tread. Don't get many folks through this time of night, she persisted, ignoring my taciturn shield. Not solitary travelers anyway. A non-committal grunt was my only response. Something dissonant hummed beneath her words. Not hostility, but a chilling lack of warmth, an unnerving neutrality. The last bite of sandwich vanished, the final dregs of coffee drained. Relief washed over me, time to escape this strange stillness. But as I rose, pushing back from the counter, her voice snagged me. "Best be careful out there," she murmured, the volume dropping, intimate yet cold. "Easy to lose your way on these stretches after dark." I offered another vague nod, a mumbled word of thanks, already turning towards the exit. My hand reached for the door handle when her voice came one last time, sharp, arresting. "If you find yourself turned around, you just come on back. We'll see you right." A peculiar resonance in her tone made me pause, a flicker of warning, but fatigue and the urge to flee dismissed it as paranoia. Late hour, tired mind, misplaced pleasantries. Back in the car's familiar cocoon, the engine coughed life, shattering the quiet. I pulled away, the diner shrinking in the rearview mirror, its lonely light swallowed by the encroaching dark. The road stretched ahead, ink black, illuminated only by the twin beams slicing through the night. I drove, trying to dislodge the uncanny residue the encounter had left, the woman's vacant stare. 10 minutes ticked by, marked only by the tire's drone. Then, a disquieting flicker of recognition. A landmark, a peculiarly shaped tree, a road sign I distinctly recalled passing earlier. A frown creased my brow. My phone, predictably, displayed no signal, offering no digital reassurance. I pressed on, dismissing it as disorientation, a trick of the exhausted mind. Yet, minutes later, the impossible solidified ahead, a familiar, fractured pink glow coalescing in the distance. The diner. The same diner I had departed only moments before. My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles white, a glacial tremor tracing my spine. I had driven straight, unwavering. A loop was impossible on this featureless highway. Yet, there it stood. I coasted back into the desolate lot, staring. Identical. The flickering sign, the spectral light bathing the lonely building, the ancient pickup slumbering in its designated spot. A ragged breath escaped me. There had to be a turn missed, a hidden curve, some logical explanation eroded by fatigue. It had to be. Exiting the car felt like stepping onto a stage for a play I hadn't rehearsed. The bell above the door offered its frail, mocking jingle. And there she was, Agnes, poised behind the counter, precisely as before, her expression an unreadable mask. Back so soon. The question hung in the sterile air, utterly devoid of surprise. A brittle smile stretched my lips. Seemed to have gotten myself a little lost. She inclined her head fractionally, accepting the flimsy excuse without comment, her eyes unwavering, holding that same dispassionate scrutiny. Defeated, I slid back onto the same stool. There was, after all, nowhere else. Coffee? She inquired, hand already moving towards the urn. Please, I heard myself say, striving for a steady tone. She poured, the dark liquid filling the mug, placing it before me. I raised it, hoping the caffeine shock might dispel the encroaching nightmare. The taste was identical. Acrid, potent, unsettlingly familiar. My stomach churned. I set the cup down. My gaze drifted, snagging on the clock mounted above the pass-through. Its hands were static, frozen at the exact time I had first entered. A cold sweat beaded on my neck, the silence amplifying the frantic thudding in my chest. Everything all right? Agnes's voice sliced through the paralysis. Fine, I blurted, forcing the smile again. Just tired. She nodded slowly, but her eyes held a flicker of something else now. Not quite pity, but a knowing weariness, as if she recognized a pattern I was only beginning to perceive. I drained the coffee, the bitterness coating my tongue. Staying felt unbearable. Thanks again, I said, pushing away from the counter, desperate for motion, for escape. Think I'll try my luck again. She merely watched, impassive, as I retreated. The bell chimed my exit into the oppressive night. I scrambled into the car, ignition catching, tires spitting gravel as I accelerated away, refusing to look back, focusing fiercely on the center line, willing the road to behave, to lead somewhere, anywhere else. 10 minutes. The highway unspooled, dark and straight. Then, inevitably, impossibly, the phosphorescent glow reappeared on the horizon. The diner, waiting. My stomach plummeted, hands trembling uncontrollably on the wheel. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't disorientation. That was a cage. I pulled into the lot for the third time, the engine idling, my mind a frantic scramble. The pickup remained. The sign pulsed its sickly rhythm. The building waited, patient, implacable. Stepping out felt like surrendering. The bell's jingle was a death knell. She stood there, waiting. That unchanging, vacant stare. Back again. The words were not a question, but a statement of fact. I offered no reply this time, unable to summon the energy for pretense. I simply stared back, profound dread crystallizing within me. Her lack of surprise was the most terrifying thing of all. Expected. Coffee? The word was almost gentle, offering the familiar ritual. No. My voice was a threadbare whisper. How do I leave? How do I get out of here? Agnes regarded me for a long, waited moment, her gaze seeming to penetrate beyond the surface, probing something deeper. A faint sigh escaped her, tinged with what might have been disappointment, perhaps resignation. Sometimes, she began, her voice low and even, folks find themselves tethered. They drive and drive, thinking they're moving forward, but the road just brings them back. Maybe it's something carried, maybe something left undone. Always, they return. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What are you saying? I haven't done anything. I'm just driving. She nodded, but a profound skepticism lingered in her eyes. It isn't always about the doing, she countered softly. Sometimes, the heaviest anchors are forged in the things not done. Ice traced its way through my veins as forgotten moments. Regrets pushed deep below the surface, flickered at the edges of my consciousness. I shook my head, denying the implication. This was just a place. Uncanny. Yes, but just wood and glass and neon. Couldn't know. I just want to leave, I pleaded, the tremor in my voice undeniable now. Please, just tell me the way out. She held my gaze for another eternity, her face an unreadable cipher, then a slow, deliberate nod. Get back in your vehicle, she instructed, her tone flat, precise. Drive straight. Resist the urge to turn. Do not look behind you. And perhaps the road will release you. I didn't wait for another word. I pivoted, fled through the door, the bell's final chime echoing like a closing lock. Inside the car, engine roaring, I took a shuddering breath, gripping the wheel with fierce determination. I pulled out, eyes fixed forward, forcing down the rising panic, the urge to glance in the mirror. Straight ahead. Don't turn. Don't look back. I drove, the miles devoured by the headlights, hope warring with terror. 10 minutes passed. Then, shimmering in the immense darkness ahead, a familiar, fractured pink glow began to coalesce. The diner, waiting. The dead center of the night, precisely when the bedside clock digits solidified into that unholy trinity. My telephone split the stillness. A jagged electronic shriek tearing through the fragile membrane of near sleep I'd been coaxing. Little comprehension dawned then, in that bleary moment, that this electronic summons heralded not just an interruption, but the overture to a months-long descent into a waking nightmare. My hand, clumsy with sleep, scrabbled across the nightstand, fingers closing around the cool glass. The screen flared, painfully bright. Number withheld. A flicker of logic. Decline. Ignore. Ward with an instinct I couldn't name. I pressed answer. Yes. My voice, a dry husk. Only silence answered, thick and expectant. Then, impossibly close to the receiver, the delicate friction of breath drawn in, held, released. Hello. I tried again, injecting a firmness I didn't feel. Identify yourself. The respiration continued, a soft metronome counting down unknown seconds before the connection severed abruptly. A cold knot formed in my gut as I stared at the blank screen. A crossed wire, surely. Some insomniac fumbling in the dark. Nothing more. For the following night, the clock displayed 3:15 a.m., and the phone screamed anew. The same withheld number, the same pregnant pause, the same intimate sound of breathing. By the third nocturnal assault, anticipation had curdled into a grim readiness. I snatched the phone mid-ring. "Listen," I began, striving for command over the tremor in my voice. "I have no idea who you think you're calling or what game this is, but it ends now. This is harassment." The breathing pattern shifted, hitched, became ragged, hurried, and then, just as the line clicked dead, a whisper coiled into my ear, so faint it was almost subliminal, yet it froze the marrow in my bones. "We perceive you." Sleep became a forgotten country. Reason insisted it was a prank. Malicious teenagers armed with burner phones. Yet, an insidious certainty grew, a fungal bloom of dread. This was something else. The calls persisted, a nightly ritual at the ungodly hour of 3:15. Always a different spoofed number flashing on the screen. Always that disembodied breath, a ghost's sigh in the machine. Blocking them proved futile. They bypassed the barriers. I changed my number, a desperate measure swallowed by futility. When, days later, the 3:15 summons found me again. Eventually, I stopped answering. What difference did it make? Still, the phone would blaze to life in the oppressive dark, vibrating against the wood grain, a silent, insistent demand, before lapsing into voicemail. Voicemail that remained perpetually, chillingly empty. My existence began to fray at the edges. Sleep deprivation fogged my days, carving shadows under my eyes. Concentration shattered like dropped glass. My work faltered. Connections with friends grew tenuous, strained by my deepening withdrawal and jumpiness. A creeping paranoia took root, convincing me unseen eyes tracked my movements, that my steps were shadowed. I sought help from the authorities, presenting my fragmented story, the log of phantom calls. They offered sympathetic shrugs, bureaucratic helplessness. No overt threats, no tangible proof. Change your number again, they suggested. Perhaps invest in a new device. Hollow advice against a presence that felt increasingly spectral, untraceable. My own frantic online searches for the number's origins dissolved into digital smoke. Untraceable prepaids, ghost accounts, impossible sequences. Weeks bled into months. The nature of the calls subtly mutated. The breathing sometimes gave way to indistinct susurrations, whispers just below the threshold of understanding. Footfalls echoed from some unseen, distant corridor. Once, terrifyingly, I heard a faint, distorted echo of my own voice, as if flung back at me across a vast, empty space. I began a new ritual, staying awake, waiting, needing to experience the call, to contain it within those few seconds. My life contracted, revolving entirely around that 3:15 a.m. appointment with the unknown. My job vanished. The apartment became a sealed crypt. Windows were draped, taped. Any aperture a potential conduit for the watchers I felt were intrinsically linked to the calls. Friends attempted interventions, their concerned faces blurring at the edge of my self-imposed isolation. How could I articulate this creeping insanity without sounding irrevocably broken? Then, a shift in the pattern. One night, 3:15 arrived. The phone vibrated. I answered out of ingrained compulsion. No breath this time. Instead, a voice, warped and synthetic, yet chillingly articulate. "Look outside." My heart seized, a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. Trembling fingers parted the heavy curtain just enough to peer down. Onto the street below, bathed in the sickly yellow cast of the lamps, stood a figure, utterly still. Its head was tilted upwards, directly at my window. Even across the distance in the gloom, I could discern the object held to its ear. A phone. The curtain fell back as I recoiled, the handset tumbling from my grasp, clattering against the floorboards. Not real. This couldn't be real. A hallucination born of fear and sleeplessness. But the following night, it was there again, and the next. Sometimes beneath the oak tree, sometimes across the street, sometimes closer. Always watching, always calling. Sleep became an impossibility. Days dissolved into a gray fog of exhaustion and hypervigilance. Every sudden noise a potential attack. And each night at 3:15, the ritual. Answer. Look. See the silent sentinel. This existence was unsustainable. Something had to break. So, one night, fueled by a potent cocktail of desperation and profound fatigue, I committed an act of profound recklessness. When 3:15 struck and the figure materialized below, I descended. Down the stairs, out the door, into the cool night air, my pulse a frantic drum against my sternum. As I approached, the figure remained immobile, seemingly indifferent to my advance. Just standing there, phone pressed to its unseen ear, gazing towards me with eyes lost in shadow. Who are you? The question ripped from my throat, ragged and shaking. What is it you want? Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the figure lowered its phone. It spoke, the voice seeming to emanate not from its throat, but from the air itself, resonant and multi-layered. We are you. I blinked, processing the impossible words. What? That doesn't mean anything. It took a step, moving into a pool of lamplight. I saw its face. My face. But refracted, distorted, as if viewed through flawed, ancient glass. A funhouse caricature. We are the sum of your unrealized selves. Stated, the voice flat, devoid of human inflection. Every choice unmade, every path abandoned. We have been trying to establish contact. My head swam. I stumbled backwards. No, this is a dream, a nightmare. The thing wearing my face offered a smile, a grotesque stretching of lips, wholly alien to my own expressions. Oh, it is quite real, Elias. Contact has been made. Now, we can commence. Commence what? I whispered, dread coiling tighter. The integration, it replied. It is time for all the variations of us to coalesce. Time to be liberated. I broke then, turned and fled. Ran with burning lungs and legs screaming in protest, the cityscape blurring around me. Ran until collapse seemed imminent. I finally staggered to a halt, gasping, leaning against the grimy brick wall of an unfamiliar alleyway, the reek of decay sharp in my nostrils. And then I heard it, a phone ringing. My phone. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I retrieved it. Numbers withheld. 3:15 a.m., I answered. My own voice, twisted and synthesized, filled my ear. You cannot outrun yourself, Elias. We are where you have been, where you might have gone, and we are coming to reclaim our share. The line went dead. Standing alone in the suffocating darkness of that strange alley, the chilling realization washed over me. This ordeal was not concluding. It was merely entering a new, terrifying phase. Now, every ringtone sends a jolt of terror through me. Every reflection holds the potential horror of seeing that distorted other staring back. How it ends, I cannot fathom. If escape is even possible from the selves I never became, the selves now hunting me. All I know is that when the phone rings at 3:15 a.m., a treacherous part of me still feels the pull to answer. Because in the wreckage of my life, those terrifying calls are the only anchor, the only thing that still feels undeniably real. Even now, recalling the night the world tilted on its axis sends a cold spider walk up my spine. Superstition isn't my vice, and fear rarely finds purchase in me. Yet this edifice, this heap of bricks and dormant lives, burrows deep. Its silence is profound, almost suffocating. Solitude suits me. So initially, the hush felt like sanctuary. But then came the aberrations next door. Whispers of wrongness I could no longer dismiss. 6 months I've resided here, drawn by the modest rent and surprising dimensions. The walls possess a reassuring thickness, ceilings stretch high, and the corridor lamps engage in fits of epileptic flickering. Neighbors are spectral figures, glimpsed hauling provisions or vanishing toward unseen labors. Doors invariably sealed, voices muted. It's a geography of averted gazes and self-containment. Precisely the anonymity I craved. The adjacent dwelling, to my right along the passage, presents a door indistinguishable from its brethren, painted the color of old bone, chipped near the threshold. A cyclopean peephole stares blankly, obscured from within. My own attempts to penetrate its darkness yielded nothing. Always, perpetual night seemed to reign inside. My first assumption involved nocturnal employment, some soul whose rhythms ran counter to the sun. I never witnessed ingress or egress, rationalizing they must slip away during the deepest hours. Yet discrepancies began to snag at the edges of my perception. Sometimes very late, a frail luminescence would bleed through a sliver in the curtains. This was the first discordant note, for the apartment radiated vacancy. Blinds perpetually drawn tight, save for that slim lateral gap spilling a filament of light. Someone must dwell there, I reasoned, perhaps a hermit shunning daylight. Still, the utter stillness defied explanation. No footfalls, no murmurs, no electronic hum. Only that transient glow, extinguishing itself moments after appearing. One night, the clock hands nearing 2, music surfaced. Faint, languid jazz, seeping through the shared wall. I sat reading in my living area when the melody drifted in, a ghost of sound. It persisted for perhaps 20 seconds, then dissolved. Pressing an ear flat against the cool plaster, I strained for any subsequent noise, but the profound quietude had reclaimed its territory. The following day, I lingered in the hallway, listening intently by their door. Silence. The urge to knock warred with a potent unease. Intrusion felt like trespass. I retreated. Several nights hence, the music returned, closer to midnight. My bedroom, I believe, abuts their main room. The jazz motif, clearer this time, slightly amplified yet still restrained, lingered longer than before. I moved to my window, scanning the street below for an external source. Nothing stirred. Glancing across the narrow gap toward the neighboring window, I observed the curtains slightly ajar. A dim, warm radiance emanated from within. I watched, motionless, hoping to discern movement. And then I saw him. Tall, clad in somber hues, dark trousers, a long-sleeved shirt. He stood with his back to the window, seemingly contemplating a mirror perched on a table or dresser against the far wall. A mundane act, perhaps adjusting his appearance. But then, a detail seized my attention, tightening a cold fist around my gut. His reflection deviated. The man's shoulders rose, the intake of a deep breath, yet the mirrored figure's posture remained unchanged. His right hand lifted toward his face, a gesture of wiping sweat perhaps, or rubbing his jaw, while the reflection's arm hung dormant at its side. A sudden, icy current traced my limbs. Disbelief warred with vision. I blinked repeatedly, searching for trickery. A second occupant, an optical illusion born of angled glass. But no, the reflection was his perfect duplicate in stature, silhouette, attire. Except it mimicked nothing. And then, its head turned. I froze solid. The reflection's face pivoted, gazing directly out the window. It felt aimed squarely at me, though the man himself hadn't shifted his stance an inch. My heart hammered against my ribs. A dull ache bloomed in my stomach. Immobilized, terrified to retreat, I felt the reflection's scrutiny like a physical weight, piercing and aware. A silent scream lodged in my throat. The man before the mirror remained oblivious, facing inward, while his duplicate stared outward. Then, the reflection's mouth stretched, widening into something that might have been a smile, or the prelude to speech. A soft groan echoed from the adjoining space, and simultaneously, the light winked out. The window became a black rectangle. The music ceased in the same instant. I stood transfixed, staring into that void, breath coming in ragged bursts. Sweat beaded on my brow. A tremor ran through my hands, forcing me to sink onto the edge of my bed. For a long interval, my gaze fixed on the floorboards, mind scrambling for logical footholds that crumbled as soon as they formed. Sleep offered no refuge that night. Come morning, I made straight for the caretaker's office. Silas, a man whose face seemed carved from weathered wood, listened with polite confusion as I relayed the unsettling events next door. He informed me, quite plainly, that the unit had stood vacant for years. Had a new tenant moved in unknown to him? Someone possessing a spare key? No, he insisted. The apartment was unoccupied, showing me records confirming the last resident departed 5, possibly 6 years prior. The owner had listed it for sale, unsuccessfully. Silas offered to accompany me to inspect the door. Upstairs, his knock elicited only silence. He inserted the master key. The lock resisted, jammed partway. Unwilling to force entry without the owner's consent, he apologized, promising to investigate further. I returned to my rooms, adrift in frustration and a deepening sense of dread. The lights, the music, the impossible figure at the mirror. These were not figments. That evening, I sought distraction, television, a microwaved meal, an early retreat to bed around 11. Sleep remained elusive. Every creak in the corridor sent jolts through my system, my hearing strained, attuned to the slightest sound from the adjacent void. Near midnight, a soft thud resonated against the shared wall. Subtle, like a palm or shoulder pressed against the plaster. I rose, switched on a dim lamp, and positioned myself near the wall. ear pressed close. A faint scraping followed, the sound of fabric against drywall. Then, the jazz reappeared, barely audible, my chest constricted. Stepping back, I clutched my phone, debating a late call to Silas, deterred by the hour and a rising tide of self-consciousness. Was I succumbing to paranoia? The melody ebbed away after a few moments. Compelled, I approached my window once more. The neighboring apartment remained shrouded in darkness. I stared at the closed curtain, pulse thrumming. Suddenly, a single thread of light flickered into existence. A lamp, perhaps, or an overhead fixture, illuminating the room with a weak, uncertain glow. The curtains, still mostly drawn, afforded a narrow view. Keeping my own form hidden, I edged closer. I glimpsed him again. The man, occupying the same space near the phantom mirror. This time, only his torso and shoulders were visible. His right arm moved with deliberate slowness, as if retrieving an object from the unseen table. His face remained obscured. A second later, the reflection executed a completely independent motion, leaning forward, peering intently toward the glass. My mouth turned to dust. Paresthesia prickled my hands and feet. The same horrifying mismatch. Then, the reflection swiveled its head toward the window, pausing as if scanning the darkness outside. I ducked instinctively, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, terrified of being seen again. Breath hitched in my throat. Cautiously, I peeked above the sill. The reflection's head remained oriented in my direction, while the man's physical form seemed fixed on the mirror. The dissonance was maddening. Abruptly, the reflection raised an arm, its finger extending, pointing directly at me. My entire being locked. Movement failed me for a paralyzing second. My legs turned to water, and I stumbled backward, colliding with a stack of magazines, my elbows striking the sharp corner of my desk. A hiss of pain escaped me. When I risked another look, the light next door was extinguished. The remainder of the night unfolded on my sofa, the television murmuring on low volume for companionship. Periodic glances toward the window revealed only blackness, yet the expectation of that glow, that silhouette, lingered. Morning brought Silas changing a bulb in the hallway. I cornered him, recounting the previous night's music and the figure, attempting to articulate the impossible physics of the reflection, the words sounding absurd even to my own ears. Silas appeared perplexed, vaguely alarmed. He was awaiting the owner's return call, he explained. Permission granted, he would open the unit. Could I be present? He acquiesced with a shrug, stipulating non-interference. For days, I consciously avoided looking toward that apartment. The music surfaced once more, deep in the night, but I resisted the pull of the window, anchoring myself to the promise of imminent answers. Silas would unlock the truth. An empty room, faulty wiring, perhaps remnants of a squatter, or forgotten speakers on a timer. I clung desperately to mundane explanations. Finally, Tuesday morning arrived with Silas rapping on my door, keys jangling. He'd secured permission. We proceeded to the adjacent unit. The master key turned smoothly this time. The door swung inward an inch, then stopped, obstructed. Silas applied pressure. It yielded with a grating scrape, revealing a small barricade of aged cardboard boxes. Dust motes danced like phantoms in the invading light. Inside, dereliction reigned. Stale air hung heavy. The hardwood floor showed fissures and neglect. We moved through the living space, searching for any sign of occupancy. Nothing. No furniture, save a single dust-laden table in one corner. No chairs, no sofa, no bed in the sleeping quarters. Kitchen cupboards gaped empty. Water stains mapped the walls like ancient continents. Silas pulled open the blinds, admitting weak daylight. I scanned for a mirror. None existed. A knot tightened in my stomach. The apartment was precisely as Silas maintained. Vacant. Not a shred of evidence suggested habitation. No bedding, no clothing, no devices. The sole anomaly was a faint, lingering aroma near one corner of the living room, reminiscent of old cologne or decaying flowers. I approached the window facing my own. Its curtain, thick and grimy, sagged precariously, half detached from its rod. Pulling it aside, I confirmed the direct line of sight to my bedroom window. I pictured myself standing there, watching. My gaze drifted to the corner where I'd repeatedly seen the tall figure. No mirror, no table, nothing but faint, dusty footprints. Hours, perhaps, or vestiges of the long departed. Indeterminate. Silas offered a shrug and some platitude about old buildings playing tricks on the eyes, then departed. I lingered, exploring the other rooms, hunting for any fragment of explanation for the lights, the music, the man who wasn't there. I found nothing. Returning to my own apartment, I felt drained, profoundly unsettled. Routine offered little solace. The spectral jazz tune echoed persistently in my mind. Relief warred with a deeper, more insidious disturbance. If the apartment was truly empty, what had I seen? That night, steeling myself, I looked out my window around 11. The apartment opposite remained dark. The curtain, disturbed during our inspection, hung open. Only the unlit room across the way. A measure of calm settled over me. Perhaps the strange interlude had concluded. But just as I turned away, a light flickered on within that living room. Undeniably. No lamp, no fixture existed there hours earlier. Yet I perceived a dim glow, like a tarnished bulb or candlelight. My heart resumed its frantic cadence. I compelled myself to watch, the air in my room turning glacial against my skin. My neck grew rigid. A tall silhouette materialized, partially eclipsing the faint luminescence. The exact profile seen before. Broad shoulders, long limbs, the same outline. Positioned near the corner, the very spot declared barren that morning. My breath hitched. I waited. A moment later, it turned just enough to reveal its profile against the gloom. Details remained elusive, only the general contours. It was unequivocally looking toward me. Though its eyes were invisible, I felt their focus. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. My legs felt unstable. I fumbled for my phone, not to call, merely to hold, paralyzed by uncertainty. The figure stepped laterally, seemingly moving toward the window. Not closer, but parallel to it. It paused. The music began anew, faint, scratchy, like a worn vinyl record. My heart hammered violently. Escape felt impossible. My gaze remained locked. The figure slowly elevated an arm, index finger extended, aimed directly, unequivocally, at me. It knew. It saw me. I recoiled, my phone slipping from nerveless fingers to clatter on the floor. When I looked up again, darkness had reclaimed the window opposite. The light, the silhouette, extinguished. The music, gone. Only silence remained. I stood rooted, pulse throbbing in my temples, staring at that empty window for what felt like an eternity, but was likely mere minutes. How? After finding nothing hours before. Now, recounting this, answers remain elusive. Silas swears the unit is empty. No official explanation has surfaced. I haven't ventured back inside. I skirt that door after dark. Moving is a financial impossibility, and a stubborn sliver of hope persists, whispering of some overlooked, rational cause. Yet the memory of that reflection turning, the pointing finger, impossible, witnessed realities, refuses to fade. Sleep is a fraught territory. Closing my eyes invites the phantom jazz, the sickly glow bleeding through fabric. Sometimes I wake slick with sweat, convinced a presence stands just beyond the plaster. But courage mustered, checks reveal only darkness. A darkness that increasingly feels observant. The line between reality and something else has blurred. I know only what I saw, what I continue to hear, belief notwithstanding. Denial is futile. Something resides in that apartment, and its insistence on being acknowledged grows stronger. The most terrifying part. I fear I can no longer ignore it. Each night is a vigil, listening for the next sound, dreading the next flicker of light, utterly clueless as to how this ends, or how to make it stop. My knuckles shone white, clamped tight around the steering wheel, as the rental car's high beams tore through a blackness so absolute it felt tangible. For hours, this desolate track had unspooled beneath me, asphalt crumbling to fractured stone under the tires. The navigation on my phone had been a blank screen for the better part of an hour. No signal, no guiding lights, nothing but the ragged rhythm of my own breathing, and the gaunt silhouettes of old fences leaning roadside, as if poised to impart some grave secret through the glass. I, Elias, was here on business, a negotiation concerning a small factory town, far from anywhere familiar. I'd promised my family I'd return by the weekend. Now midnight had bled into the small hours, the main highway a distant memory, perhaps a figment. The longer I drove, the more the night seemed to press inward, a physical weight constricting my chest. A bead of sweat carved a path down my temple, defying the cool air. I should have sought refuge hours ago, taken a room in the last town flickering with life, but the urge to shorten the journey had overridden sense. A costly error. Every instinct vibrated with wrongness. Slowing the car, I strained my eyes into the gloom beyond the headlights' reach. And then, off to the right, a congregation of dark shapes, rooflines stark against the moonless void. I eased onto the shoulder, the engine settling into a low murmur. The settlement, too large for a solitary farm, appeared utterly forsaken. A few timber houses stood sentinel, their windows like vacant eyes or sealed with blind planks. A dilapidated inn sign listed precariously, its inscription illegible in the profound dark. The silence outside wasn't merely an absence of sound. It had substance, density. I cut the engine. The world shrank to the frantic pulse hammering within my own ribs. Emerging from the car, I felt the gravel crunch loudly underfoot. Hello. My voice sounded thin, alien, swallowed whole by the stillness. No answer came. The ground tilted subtly beneath my feet. A rusted gate groaned open at my push, admitting me into what might have once served as a town square. The beam from my flashlight trembled, playing across warped doors and blistered paint. The architecture spoke of a bygone century, steeped in neglect. Dust lay like a shroud, Cobwebs hung like morbid decorations. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and decay, a dry, stale perfume that tightened my throat. I tried one door. It held fast. Another yielded with a low moan, revealing a narrow passage and a deserted parlor frozen in time. I stepped inside, each footfall stirring clouds of dust motes that danced in the torchlight. Remnants of life remained, a table still draped in rotting lace, a sofa disgorging its stuffing. Opposite me hung an oval mirror in a cracked frame, its glass so filmed with grime it barely reflected the light. I had no desire to see myself mirrored in this place. A prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck, the distinct feeling of being observed, yet the dust lay smooth, unmarked by recent passage. The silence pressed down, intolerable. "Anyone here?" I whispered, the question absorbed by the waiting house. And then I heard it. The faintest resonance, a single, clear bell tone sounding somewhere outside. I froze, mouth dry, and retreated back onto the uneven street. The bell chimed again, followed moments later by a second, higher-pitched note. The sound originated deeper within the cluster of buildings. Drawn by an invisible current, my heart pounding a heavy rhythm, I followed the sound. Rounding a corner choked with weeds, I found myself in a narrow lane. There, tied with frayed rope to a leaning wooden post, hung a small bell. No wire ran to it, no breeze stirred the stagnant air, yet it swayed almost imperceptibly. Its delicate chime, though soft, sent a cold shiver down my spine. Further along, another bell was perched bizarrely atop a chimney, like some grotesque weather vane. It answered the first with a different tone, initiating a strange dialogue. More bells materialized as I ventured deeper, one dangling from a window latch, another tucked beneath a sagging porch roof, a third mounted on a twisted iron hook behind sealed shutters. Each added its voice in sequence, a scattered choir of metallic whispers across the desolation. A tremor started in my hands. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. These bells felt sentient, conversing somehow, and I felt utterly certain they were talking about me. I couldn't remain still. The need to understand was overwhelming. A prank, some forgotten system of alarms. I fought for a rational explanation, but the complete absence of human life, the void where answers should have been, left only the chiming bells. I chose a larger building, a 2-story structure with a listing sign whose faded paint might once have read haberdashery. Slipping inside, I was met with damp, cold air. I picked my way over collapsed shelves. On a counter, I discovered a heavy ledger, its pages brittle and yellowed. The entries were penned in a cramped, archaic script I struggled to decipher, but the dates were clear, decades old. Then, without warning, the record simply stopped. No final entry, no mention of evacuation or departure, just an abrupt halt followed by empty, ruled pages. Outside, the bells continued their concert, some tinkling faintly, others emitting deep, resonant tones. I sought a moment's respite in a back room where a bare cot remained. I sat, my back against the clammy wall, my legs trembling slightly. My throat was parched. I took a sip from my water bottle, my hand unsteady. The thought of leaving, of finding the car and driving away, warred with a paralyzing uncertainty. Could I even navigate my way out of this maze of forgotten roads? And the bells, they exerted a peculiar pull, a silent insistence that I grasp their secret before I could be released. I forced myself back into the open air, My watch showed nearly 2 in the morning. A fragile crescent moon had risen, casting a weak, spectral light on the rooftops. The bells seemed quieter now, their voices scattered throughout the village like seeds sown on the wind. I imagined them hidden in every shadowed nook, behind locked doors, within dusty attics and soot-stained chimneys, hanging from lampposts long stripped of their lamps, everywhere. As I passed another house, a sudden gust of wind, from where, in this breathless place, whipped grit into my eyes, rubbing them, blinking through the sting. My gaze caught on a tall, standing mirror propped against a hallway wall, glimpsed through a half-open door. This mirror was different from the one in the parlor, larger, framed in heavy wood, carved with elaborate twisting vines. Something about it drew me closer. I slipped inside the house, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The mirror's surface was coated in dust, but I could make out my own silhouette. I stepped forward, raised a trembling hand, and wiped a small patch clear with my sleeve. My own eyes stared back, wide with apprehension. At that precise moment, a single bell chimed, a soft, warm, almost intimate sound, like a whispered word. I spun around, the flashlight beam jerking across the empty room. Nothing. The bell called again, seemingly from somewhere above. Moving into what might have been a kitchen, I found a tiny bell hanging from the corner of a cabinet. It was minuscule, barely noticeable, yet its voice was perfectly clear, like a gentle finger tapping on glass. Instantly, as if in response, other bells outside answered, their tones overlapping, echoing down corridors and deserted lanes, building into a complex, eerie conversation. My heart raced. I stepped backward, retreating towards the hall mirror. I caught my reflection again. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, I could have sworn I saw another figure standing just behind me, an indistinct shape with hollow eyes. When I whirled around, of course, the space was empty. My skin crawled. The hour was late. Exhaustion gnawed at me. The bells continued their ceaseless calling, and now, was it fatigue playing tricks, or did I truly hear it? They seemed to shape my name from their layered tones. Elias, Elias, drawn out in haunting half notes. My breath came in shallow gasps. I felt sweat trickling down my back. I had to get out, find the car, drive until the tank was dry. Anything to escape this relentless chiming. I rushed through the house, back out onto the broken street. In my haste, my foot caught on a loose stone, and I fell hard, scraping my palms raw. The sharp pain grounded me for a moment. Above, the sky seemed closer, the silence between the bell notes thicker, more profound. I started walking quickly, then broke into a desperate run. Around me, the bells seemed to ring faster, not frantically, but following some intricate pattern I couldn't decipher. I darted behind a collapsing stable and nearly ran into another bell, this one tied to an old pitchfork jammed into the earth. I plunged into what looked like a general store, hoping to find something. A tool, a rag, anything to block the sound. Inside, amidst the debris, I found a stack of dusty canvas aprons. I grabbed one and wrapped it clumsily around my head, muffling the incessant chorus. I stood there, panting like a winded animal. Through the grimy window pane, I saw my reflection. The apron made me look absurd. But then my eyes snagged on something else. The reflection of the door behind me seemed wrong, the wood subtly warped. And within that distortion, I glimpsed a pair of eyes that were not my own. gazing out from the mirror-like surface of the glass. I spun around. The door was just a door. Empty. Silent. A deep, resonant clang echoed from the village square. Tearing the apron from my head, I follow the sound, driven now by a strange amalgam of terror and compulsive curiosity. At the very center of this silent place stood a tall pole surmounted by a large bell. It was bigger than the others, heavy and ancient-looking, perhaps a church bell from a forgotten time. I walked towards it, my legs shaky. Behind me, I sensed movement, a subtle shift in the shadows, but when I turned, there was only darkness. Then, all the bells, large and small, began to chime again, more slowly this time, their voices layering into a low, pervasive hum that seemed to vibrate deep within my chest. My heart pounded in unwilling rhythm with it. I couldn't shake the overwhelming sensation of being watched, scrutinized by 1,000 invisible eyes, peering from behind darkened windows and crumbling eaves. My skin tingled as if overrun by unseen insects. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I knew my only option was to flee. I stumbled back down the main street, past the rows of silent houses and vacant doorways, listening as the sound of the bells gradually faded with each step. Finally, I reached my car. The relief was palpable, like cool water on scorched skin. I slid behind the wheel, hands trembling violently, and turned the ignition. The headlights flared to life, illuminating a weathered wooden sign at the village entrance I hadn't noticed before. In the reflective surface of the windshield, which now felt uncannily like another mirror, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something pale moving amongst the buildings in the distance. The bells offered one final, unified chime. My name. I was certain of it now, and then fell utterly silent. I slammed my foot in the accelerator, the engine roaring defiance against the hush, and pulled away. I did not look back. Once I found an open road again, miles from that place, I realized my hands were still shaking uncontrollably. A tightness gripped my chest, and a persistent buzzing filled my ears that no amount of rushing night air could dispel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, convinced I would see something in pursuit. A shadowy figure, a floating bell, a distorted face leering from the darkness. But there was nothing. Only the empty road and the indelible memory of that eerie village, its phantom chorus, and the constant, unnerving sensation of invisible eyes tracking my every move. By dawn, I reached a main highway and followed it until the garish lights of a diner appeared like a beacon. Inside, the clatter of cutlery and the smell of coffee felt profoundly alien after the night I had endured. In the restroom, I splashed cold water on my face, the shock momentarily steadying me. Then I looked up, meeting my own eyes in the mirror above the sink. For just a second, I could have sworn I heard it, the faintest, most distant echo of a chime. My reflection seemed to flicker, or perhaps it was just exhaustion. Yet, I couldn't shake the deep-seated feeling that what I had encountered in that village, what I had fled from, was not finished with me. The memory of those bells hummed just below the surface of my hearing, a silent resonance waiting patiently for the right moment to ring my name again. His neighborliness was a mask, I see that now. A carefully crafted facade that crumbled the moment I saw the pinprick of crimson light winking from the depths of my bedroom vent. That minuscule gleam seemed to pulse with a mocking awareness, a silent, steadfast observer of intimacies I'd believed were mine alone. A visceral crawl feathered across my skin. How long, I wondered, how long had the watching persisted? It commenced 3 months prior, when Silas arrived, settling into the house adjoining mine like ivy taking root. His greetings were effusive, waves flung from his driveway with a studied casualness, offers of assistance with the garden delivered too readily. The nocturnal hours he kept, glimpsed pacing his own yard under the moon's cold eye, I dismissed. Shift work, I'd reasoned, deliberately smoothing over the faint prickle of disquiet his focused gaze sometimes ignited. One twilight, while I coaxed life into my wilting hydrangeas, Silas materialized at the edge of my lawn, a plate of still warm biscuits extended. A little something, he murmured, his smile a curious curve that never quite crinkled the skin around his eyes. Keeps the shadows at bay. The baking. His gaze snagged on mine, held a fraction too long, a silent pressure that made the humid air feel thick. I offered thanks, masking the unease tightening my chest. Weeks bled into one another, marked by faint dissonances. A novel repositioned on the nightstand, spine infinitesimally shifted. A framed photograph canted at an unnatural angle. Whispers of displacement, too slight to name, yet persistent enough to fray the edges of my certainty. Then, the susurrations began within the walls. Faint, dry rustlings, like insects scrabbling behind the plaster. Sleep became a shallow pool I couldn't sink into, jolted awake by phantom creaks, the conviction of presence palpable in the empty rooms. Friends murmured about paranoia, the groans of an aging structure, but an internal compass screamed that something was profoundly, terrifyingly amiss. One pre-dawn darkness, the unmistakable groan of a floorboard underfoot shattered the silence. I lay rigid, breath trapped in my throat, tracking the sound's stealthy pilgrimage down the hall, pausing just outside my door. An eternity stretched before retreating steps whispered away, followed by the almost inaudible click of the front latch. Morning light brought the shaky insistence it was merely a nightmare, a figment conjured by exhaustion, until, dressing, my gaze snagged on the ventilation grill high on my bedroom wall. Something was off. A chair provided unsteady purchase. Peering closer, my breath hitched. Nestled behind the metal slats, mocking my sanctuary, was the obsidian gleam of a miniature lens. A glacial cold seeped into my bones, my sanctuary violated, my privacy plundered. I scrambled down, limbs trembling, the room tilting. How many? How long? The name formed unbidden. Silas. It had to be. My fingers, slick with sudden sweat, fumbled with my phone, dialing for help. While the sirens wailed their distant approach, a frantic scavenger hunt commenced. More eyes, embedded in the innocuous curve of the living room lamp, disguised within the digital face of the kitchen clock. Even obscenely, peering from the chrome gleam of the shower head. Each discovery was a physical blow, bile rising in my throat. No corner remained untouched, untainted. Their arrival brought a temporary surge of procedure. Photographs snapped, surfaces dusted with gray powder. They listened, their expressions professionally modulated concern. But naming Silas, voicing the certainty clawing at my insides, elicited only polite skepticism. "We'll certainly investigate, Ms. Vance," one officer offered, his tone placating. "But conjecture isn't evidence." A scream built in my chest, demanding release. But I swallowed it down, offering a numb nod as they gathered their equipment and departed. The house felt contaminated, breathing with unseen watchers. A hastily packed bag, a drive across town to Lena's embrace. Horror widened her eyes as the story tumbled out, her insistence immediate. "You're staying here until they catch this monster." But days dissolved into a week, yielding nothing tangible for the police. No prints, no stray DNA. The cameras, ubiquitous models, untraceable. Silas, when questioned, produced an unshakable alibi for the night of the phantom footsteps. The truth felt slippery, receding. Then, deep in the third watch of the night, Lena's urgent whisper pulled me from a restless doze. "Alara, someone's outside." Her face was a stark white mask in the gloom. Trying the door. We huddled in her bedroom, the rattle of the knob a metallic heartbeat against the silence. Lena fumbled for her phone, whispering coordinates to the dispatcher, while I crept to the window and saw him. Bathed in the sickly orange glow of a streetlight, Silas stood on the lawn, gaze fixed unerringly on my window. Our eyes locked across the distance. A slow smile spread across his lips, the same vacant curve as before. Then he dissolved back into the encompassing shadows, just as the first wail of approaching sirens pierced the night. Another search, another void. The officer's questions held a weary edge. Why would the neighbor follow you here? Doubt thickened the air. Sleep became an impossibility. Silas's smiling face was imprinted on the backs of my eyelids. Every nocturnal house-settling sound became his footfall. Lena's worry was a palpable thing, a shared exhaustion settling over us like dust. I couldn't remain a fugitive in my sister's home, tethered to a fear the world refused to validate. My return was defiant, a conscious act of reclaiming territory. Lena pleaded, called it madness. "He won't drive me out," I insisted, the words tasting like bravado. The house stood bathed in incongruous afternoon sunlight, outwardly unchanged. Yet stepping across the threshold felt like entering a compromised space, the air thick with remembered violation. My first act, a meticulous room-by-room sweep for new intrusions. Nothing. The absence of discovery was almost more unnerving. The known threat replaced by an amorphous, pervasive sense of being exposed. Nights were vigils, sleep a shallow, easily disturbed surface. Days crept by, the silence stretching taut. A fragile sense of normalcy began to tentatively sprout. Then, one evening, tending to the defiant green of my porch plants, a mirror image of that long-ago twilight with the biscuits. A flicker of movement from his window caught my eye. Silas, watching. He lifted a hand, a slow, deliberate wave. That smile. I recoiled, dropping the watering can, stumbling back inside, the lock clicking sharply. My hand hovered over my phone, the impulse to call instantaneous, yet futile. What crime was a wave? A notification chimed, an unfamiliar email address. My fingers, suddenly clumsy, tapped it open. Ice water flooded my veins. Images. Dozens. Me. Inside my house, oblivious. At my desk at work. browsing shelves in a bookstore. Some predated the camera discovery. Others were chillingly recent. The final photograph stopped my breath. Me, right now, framed in my own living room window, captured mere moments ago. Below it, 5 stark words. I'm always watching. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the hardwood. The familiar walls pressed inward, suffocating. It wasn't just the cameras, the intrusion. It was the eradication of sanctuary, the poisoning of peace. This would never end. He would never stop. How could safety ever exist again? Even escape felt futile. The threat wasn't the house, it was him. As dusk bled through the windows, painting long, skeletal shadows across the floor, I remained inert, paralyzed by a fear that had become my atmosphere. In the burgeoning darkness, a single question resonated. In a world wired for observation, where does one truly hide? The phone's screen flickered, catching my eye. The email remained open, its gallery of stolen moments a testament to my captivity. Reason dictated I call the police, present this undeniable proof. Yet a weary cynicism questioned its efficacy. If they couldn't apprehend him before, what leverage did pixels truly offer now? Movement outside, footfalls ascending my porch steps, a silhouette gliding past the window. Then, a soft rapping, knuckles against the wood. Alara. Silas's voice, smooth, solicitous. Saw your light. Everything all right over there? Silence was my only shield. I sat frozen in the deepening twilight, the frantic pulse in my ears drowned out only by the faint, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape of fingernails against the wood of my front door. Waiting, watching, forever. A constriction seized my chest the moment my boots touched the ground outside the car. The air hung sodden, thick with the aroma of ancient wood and decomposing leaves. My friend's cabin perched precariously at the head of a precipitous trail, encircled by pines that pierced the late afternoon sky like obsidian shards. Gazing towards the summit above, I observed swirling skeins of fog drifting in languid circles, a sight that churned my stomach despite my attempts to embrace the promised relaxation. It was just fatigue from the long drive, I insisted to myself, yet an undeniable disquiet emanated from the mountain itself. Liam, my friend, materialized beside me, a hearty clap landing between my shoulder blades as he urged me indoors before the mist thickened into an impenetrable shroud. Wordlessly, I followed him onto the narrow porch, its aged planks groaning a protest beneath our weight. The cabin's interior offered a claustrophobic embrace. A diminutive living area bled into a tiny kitchen, flanked by a single bathroom and 2 sleeping quarters. Liam confessed he'd been escaping here most weekends, extolling the virtues of the vistas and the clarifying power of isolation. My eyes scanned the shelves veiled in dust, the bulb overhead sputtering erratically, the windows choked by heavy drapes. An aura of staleness permeated everything. Nevertheless, I forced a veneer of casualness. We deposited my bag in the spare room before settling at a scarred table for a swift meal. Through the window panes, I noted a spectral blurring, as if the fog outside had breathed upon the glass, though the evening wasn't particularly cold. Liam waved it off, murmuring about the mountain's breath seeping into every fissure. Nothing to fret over. Dinner concluded, I retreated to my room, anticipating blessed quietude. Sleep, however, proved elusive. Outside, the wind had roused itself, howling a mournful dirge through the skeletal branches. A sliver of window remained open, admitting a chill draft that kissed my face. With each violent gust, the cabin's very structure seemed to exhale low groans, a rhythmic cadence of creaks and sighs that punctuated the darkness. Lying supine, I stared at the ceiling, consciously slowing my respiration until, sometime near midnight, my eyelids grew heavy and I succumbed. How long I slept remains unknown. An alien coldness brushed my cheeks, jolting me awake. Tendrils of opalescent mist coiled within the room, obscuring the familiar contours. I pushed myself upright, blinking furiously against the haze, struggling to orient myself. Then I saw it. A silhouette materialized beside my bed. A frantic drumbeat commenced against my ribs. My mouth turned instantly to parchment. It possessed the unmistakable form of a person, utterly motionless. A strangled gasp was the only sound I could summon, frozen by a paralysis that rooted me to the spot. The shape remained dark, yet I could discern the slope of shoulders, the curve of a head, the stillness of arms held rigidly at its sides. A silent sentinel. Raw terror clawed at my throat, silencing the scream that yearned for release. My hands trembled violently, a cold sweat beading on my brow despite the glacial air. With fumbling, desperate movements, my fingers scrabbled for the lamp switch on the nightstand. A click, a flood of light, and in that stark glare, the presence evaporated. The fog lingered, a swirling gauze, but the space beside my bed was undeniably empty. Perched on the mattress edge, I rubbed my eyes, the frantic pounding in my chest echoing in my temples. A trick of the light, I reasoned frantically. A hypnagogic hallucination born of exhaustion, altitude, humidity, anything but reality. Forcing myself back beneath the covers, I drew the sheets tight to my chin, my gaze fixed on the shadowed corners until the first frail light of dawn painted the mist outside the window. At breakfast, I ventured the question. Had Liam ever witnessed anything unusual in the cabin after dark? He offered a dismissive chuckle, shaking his head, attributing my experience to the trifecta of altitude sickness, dehydration, and the fog's notorious capacity for illusion. I offered no argument, though a persistent tremor lingered in my hands, my mouth still parched. Liam pressed a bottle of water upon me, suggesting a brief hike to dispel the lingering phantoms. Thinking the crisp air might indeed help, I acquiesced. We embarked on a slender trail snaking through the pines, our steps silenced by a thick carpet of fallen needles. The mist eddied around us in capricious patches, sometimes swirling at our ankles like phantom tides, before lifting into the dense canopy. I tried anchoring myself to the physical act of walking, the pressure of my boots on the yielding earth, the nascent burn in my calves, the sharp snap of twigs underfoot. Yet the wind persisted, whipping the fog into unpredictable whirls, and each upward glance towards the shrouded peaks tightened that familiar vice around my chest. After perhaps an hour's trek, the path spilled into a small clearing, a vantage point reputed for its breathtaking panorama. Today, however, yielded only shifting, impenetrable layers of white, as if we stood upon a precipice, overlooking an abyss of swirling vapor. The wind howled, rendering the world beyond a few feet invisible. Liam declared it time to retreat, jesting about the futility of seeking views in such weather. I nodded mutely, my attention snared by a sound, a faint susurrus reaching me, like whispers carried on the wind, emanating from the fog-bound depths surrounding us. It was too indistinct to decipher words, yet possessed an undeniably human quality, the murmur of a distant, unseen crowd. "Did you hear that?" I asked Liam. He merely shrugged, attributing it to the wind's mimicry among the pines, amplified by the dense fog. I attempted to dismiss it, but as we retraced our steps, the whispers coalesced, swelling into a disembodied chorus of overlapping lamentations. Not loud, but chillingly clear, raising the hairs on my neck. A sideways glance confirmed Liam's apparent oblivion, his focus solely on navigating the path. My stomach revolted. A clammy sweat broke out across my skin. My pace quickened involuntarily. Liam inquired if I was all right. A curt nod and a mumbled affirmative were all I could manage, masking the panic blooming within my chest. Reaching the cabin felt like crossing a finish line. I practically bolted inside. The heavy thud of my heart resonated in my ears. Once indoors, a measure of relief washed over me. Even the cabin's musty air felt like a sanctuary compared to the boundless, whispering fog outside. Liam offered coffee, an offer I readily accepted. Seated again at the worn table, he switched on an old radio perched near the window. Static wrestled with a faint signal, a distant voice discussing an approaching storm front. Mere background noise against the insistent replay of those ethereal voices in my mind. Real or imagined? The question echoed unanswered. That afternoon, Liam attempted levity, suggesting a visit to a nearby waterfall. I demurred, citing a need for rest, and he departed alone. Left to myself, an oppressive silence descended upon the cabin. Seeking air, I stepped onto the porch. The fog had momentarily recoiled, revealing the wooden steps and a patch of rocky earth. Taking a deep breath, I willed my nerves to settle. A faint dripping sound drew my attention to the side of the cabin, where water trickled from a gutter, pooling at the foundation. The damp, earthy smell intensified. Behind me, a branch snapped. My pulse leaped. Whipping around, I saw only the shifting curtain of fog and the dark sentinels of the trees. Yet, the unnerving sensation of being watched prickled my skin. My shoulders tensed, teeth grinding. For several heartbeats, I stood rigid, expectant. When nothing further occurred, I retreated inside, securing the lock firmly behind me. As afternoon bled into evening, the clouds outside assumed a bruised, darker hue. Liam returned, reporting the waterfall diminished to a mere trickle, and inquired about my state. A non-committal shrug was my only reply. He proposed building a fire in the small hearth. I agreed, hoping the warmth and flickering light might soothe my frayed nerves. We gathered logs, coaxed them into flame, and settled onto the couch. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows. Hypnotic tongues of fire writhed. Conversation faltered. Watching the flames offered a fleeting moment of normalcy. But with the sunset, the fog returned, pressing against the panes, transforming them into luminous, blind eyes. The temperature plummeted. Liam bid me good night and retired to his room. I lingered by the fire's dwindling warmth before resolving, finally, to face my own room again. It felt colder than before. I ensured the window was latched tight. Despite my efforts, I saw it. A sinuous ribbon of mist bleeding beneath the door. My heart rate accelerated. I jammed a towel against the threshold, a futile barrier. My throat felt constricted. Leaving the lamp on this time, I slid beneath the covers, the musty scent of damp fabric already in the air. Sleep was unthinkable. I lay rigid, listening to the frantic rhythm of my own breath, eyes scanning the darkness. An hour, perhaps more, passed. Then, the familiar chill returned, brushing my face. The towel at the door was saturated, and fog drifted freely into the room. I sat bolt upright. At the foot of my bed stood 3 static forms, motionless. Their contours wavered slightly within the pervasive haze, yet seemed more substantial than the previous night's apparition. My stomach twisted violently. A surge of hot adrenaline coursed through me. The pressure in my chest intensified, stealing my breath. The coppery tang of fear flooded my mouth. A primal urge to cry out for Liam warred with the paralysis of terror. The dreadful certainty that any sound would compel them closer. My hand, shaking uncontrollably, flailed towards the bedside lamp. In the sudden, harsh illumination, the room was empty once more. The fog eddied, disturbed, but the figures had vanished. Reaching for my phone yielded only a dead icon. No signal. Driven by a desperate need for control, I flicked the lamp off, then on, off, on, testing the darkness, half expecting their return. Sweat slicked my back. Nothing. Eventually, I lay back down, though my heart refused to slow its frantic pace. Morning found me confronting Liam, the words tumbling out. People, figures, standing in my room. He offered the same tired litany. Illusion, fog, altitude, my mind playing tricks. This time, however, a distinct annoyance colored his tone, as if my fear was a personal affront to his cherished mountain sanctuary. Departure was imperative, yet a stubborn fragment of my psyche resisted, needing to prove, if only to myself, that sanity remained intact. Liam left for supplies. I stood on the porch, gazing at the peaks swathed in their customary gray shroud, the air feeling heavy, charged. A decision formed. I would venture out alone. Grabbing a flashlight and water, I chose a trail unexplored the previous day. This path proved narrower, strewn with rocks, the footing treacherous. The fog enveloped me swiftly, reducing visibility to mere yards. Silence reigned, broken only by the crunch of my own steps. Then they began again. The voices. Softly at first, a low murmur, then swelling in volume, wave upon wave, till I felt surrounded by an invisible multitude. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dizziness threatened. Tensing, I crouched low, sweeping the flashlight beam in frantic arcs. The light pierced only shifting veils of white. "Hello," I called out, my voice thin, trembling. The echo returned warped, distorted, followed by what sounded chillingly like whispered replies, unintelligible, yet undeniably responsive. Panic surged, hot and suffocating. I spun around, desperate to retreat. Each step back towards the cabin felt weighted, my boots slipping on the damp leaf litter. The wind escalated, and the voices seemed to rise with it, a cacophony just beneath the threshold of comprehension. My hands shook, flashlight beam fixed rigidly on the ground to prevent a fall. Somehow, I found my way back. The cabin door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking into place with desperate finality. I paced the small living room, gasping for breath, clothes clinging damply to my skin, a deep chill settling into my bones. Liam returned an hour later, laden with groceries. I recounted my experience on the trail. His expression held a flicker of concern, quickly masked by his usual dismissal. Altitude, damp, cold, rest, the familiar refrain. Words failed me. One more night, I resolved grimly, then escape. That evening, we attempted distraction with an old movie on a small, fuzzy television. The poor reception was almost welcome, a static-filled buffer against my thoughts. Outside, the wind raged, rattling the window panes with renewed fury. Around 10, Liam announced his retreat to bed. I remained, staring blankly at the flickering screen until my eyelids drooped with exhaustion. Entering my bedroom, I immediately saw the damp patch spreading from beneath the door, the musty odor stronger now. I checked the window lock again, wedged a fresh towel against the threshold, changed into dry clothes, and crawled into the covers, leaving the lamp burning defiantly. I focused on regulating my breathing, my eyes stinging from sleeplessness. Eventually, I must have drifted off. My eyes snapped open. The lamp still glowed, but the room was now thick with fog, a palpable entity. The cold caressed my face, and they were back. Closer this time. Two, at least, standing motionless, their outlines sharper, more defined than before, barely an arm's length from the bed. My scalp prickled, my chest seized as if gripped by an icy hand. Thought dissolved into pure, primal panic. My hand scrabbled for the lamp switch, clumsy with terror, missing it on the first try. Click. Darkness. Vanished. Click. Light. Gone. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. Sleep was now an impossibility. I sat huddled under the blanket, eyes wide, glaring into every corner, waiting, expecting, until the gray light of dawn finally seeped through the misted window. By morning, my eyes were bloodshot, my limbs leaden with fatigue and fear. I'm leaving, I told Liam, the words flat, final. He attempted persuasion, another night. Perhaps it would pass. But the cabin, the mountain, the fog, they felt saturated with something malevolent. I didn't care anymore if he thought me unhinged. Bag packed, I walked numbly to my car. Standing by the driver's side door, I risked one last look upwards. The peak remained hidden, veiled by its heavy gray shroud. The air felt thick, oppressive. For a fleeting instant, carried on the wind, I thought I heard them again. Those distant, sorrowful voices. Nausea churned within me. Forcing the car door open, I slid inside. Liam waved from the porch. Engine ignited, I cast a final glance at the cabin, then pulled away. As I navigated the rough descent, a gradual loosening occurred. The frantic pounding in my chest subsided. The tension in my shoulders eased. With each mile that distanced me from that summit, the fog thinned, relinquishing its grip. Reaching the main highway felt like surfacing for air. Sunlight streamed through scattered clouds. I could breathe again. What transpired up there remains an enigma. Liam would rationalize it all. Hallucinations, altitude, suggestion. Perhaps. But the mountain hadn't felt inert. It felt sentient, watchful, aware of my intrusion. I harbor no desire to return. Even now, the memory of those silent, encroaching figures sends an involuntary shiver down my spine. Some places are best left undisturbed, their mysteries unexplored. I intend to keep my distance permanently.